Today we're going to be talking about Spooked by spending plans. It's a part of our Get Savvy, Grow Your Webinar series. And we co-host this webinar with several universities in Illinois, including the University of Illinois Extension, University of Illinois Student Money Management Center, North Park University, Chicago. So these are some of our partners, and we are so excited to be talking to you guys today. Next slide, please. I'm going to introduce myself, and then I'll let Evelyn do hers as well. So my name is Sasha Grobinstetter. I'm a consumer economics educator with the University of Illinois Extension. I serve 3 counties, which are Grundy, Kankakee, and Will counties. So those are collar counties under Cook County, so where Chicago is. I've been there about 6 years, and I'm also an accredited financial counselor. Evie?
And my name is Evelyn, or Evie Peterson. I am the Career Programs Manager at North Park University, which is part of our Career Development and Internships Office. And North Park is located on the north side of the city of Chicago, and I've been in my position for about 4 years now.
Hey, that's awesome. Well, I always like to start with what state or county in Illinois that you're logging in from today. This will also get you, so if you can see the chat, we'd like for you to put that in the chat. We also want you to get you familiar with some of the tools in the webinar, so that's why we'd like you to put that information in the chat. Ooh, St. Augustine, Florida. I'm super jealous of you today because it is snowing here. I'm guessing NH is New Hampshire. Miami-Dade? Heck yeah. Oh, these Florida people, I'm so jealous. Champaign, Peoria. You know, it's better than snow, I feel like today. Albany, New York, Chicago, Ohio. Great. I'm glad you all could join us today. It makes things a lot more fun when we have lots of interaction. So just keep your eye on that chat box. We're going to use it quite a bit today, but be prepared. So we're going to talk a little bit about our learning objectives. We're planning to cover lots of topics today to help you overcome your financial fears, as Andrea said earlier, and we want you to help you take control of your money. So we're going to be talking about defining and creating a spending plan. We're going to talk about understanding some resources and income. We're going to identify methods of tracking expenses. We're going to talk about how to prioritize spending, because that's super important. And then we're also going to talk about when to modify your spending plan to better suit your needs. So we'll talk more about that here in just a few minutes. But of course, we always like to, again, we like the chat. We want to know what your earliest money memory is. So if you don't mind answering in the chat box, it might take you a minute to think about your earliest money memory. One of my earliest money memories is that I used to get money for good grades. Maybe not the best thing, but it definitely was one of my earliest money memories. Does anyone else have any that they want to share in the chat? Banking in elementary school. Ooh, making for popcorn. Okay. Tooth fairy money. That's a good one. Asking my dad for money for candy. Tooth fairy. Parents spending starting a savings account for me. Oh, those are all great. Those are all great. Oh, not getting an allowance. Oh, yeah, that might be an opposite of that might be a bad money memory. Money for winning the puzzle wheel on, oh yeah, Wheel of Fortune. That's great. My mom's spending hours a night calling the bank. Oh, money for chores and grades. Yep, I got that too. Yes, tooth fairy money. I love it. That's great. So of course, we're talking about money today. We're talking about financial fears. So of course, we want to talk about picturing your spending plan. So in order to visualize your spending plan and turn it into a reality, there are a few concepts that we're going to talk about and explain today. So one of those big things that we want to explain today is talking about a spending plan versus a budget. The word budget makes a lot of people feel restricted, and it also has a negative connotation, like, oh, I have to do a budget. And that also can be scary or limiting. But essentially, budgets and spending plans are the same thing, but we like to shift the emphasis onto planning that helps you take control of your finances by developing a goal-focused strategy to address your spending plan. So you can see in the first little pig, he has a budget. He's thinking about what he wants to do. Then we have that perspective shift, like we really want to plan for the future. And so then he becomes superhero piggy bank, and he has a spending plan. You know, because we talk about when budgets, they are unforgiving. They are prescriptive, but your spending plan should be more flexible, because we want your goals, your priorities, And those expenses to, if they change, that they can be shifted and more flexible than just a rigid budget. So I'm going to hand it off to Evie, and she's going to have some discussions with you guys.
Yeah, thanks, Aisha. So let's talk a little about the obstacles that make it difficult to create a spending plan or a budget. So for those of you that are logged in, what makes a spending plan scary? Does anything about budgeting freak you out? Any thoughts on here? The limitations of it, that's a great point, definitely. Different expenses that you're tracking. The small leaks, that's a good point. We'll definitely talk about that. Knowing that we may spend more than we have, not knowing the right amount of money to spend on things. Great. The time commitment, for me, sometimes the commitment overall, and never having done one. Awesome. These are great points. So talking about or thinking about money can bring up all kinds of emotions and even fearful ones, but we don't know how to overcome those fears until we identify what is causing them. So we want to focus on pulling together those pieces. What does that look like? And so we actually talk about 3 basic components of a spending plan. So you'll need to identify 1, your savings goals or existing savings, 2, your income and other resources, as well as your expenses, so the 3rd piece. And we'll be breaking down each of these components today during this webinar. And keep in mind, expenses can be fixed or variable, flexible as well as occasional. And when it comes to discretionary spending, you'll need to prioritize your needs over your wants, which can vary from person to person. So when we think about income and resources and managing money, what's the first guideline you think of? Probably how much your salary is. So we think in that income section what your wages are, or maybe what your take-home pay is after taxes. My guess is that government assistance and community services such as the library or public transportation, even gifts, would not be the first thing that comes to your mind, but they are definitely important pieces to the budget puzzle. So many Americans use government assistance programs to cover healthcare, food, and education costs, but it may not be something we consider when creating a budget. These are useful resources that can help us accomplish our goals and meet basic needs. So being aware of them is critical to making an efficient budget. SNAP, or the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, helps millions of low-income individuals and families. So we'll talk about SNAP and food resources later in this webinar. There could also be food pantries or shelters in your area. I know here in Chicago around our campus we have some of those. And if you are a college student, there are some university campuses that have food pantries specifically for their students. In terms of the community resources, not everyone qualifies for certain resources, but it is important to know what resources are available for you when helping to hack your budget or your spending plan. So for example, if you have a great public transportation system, like we do here in Chicago, then to take advantage of it. When looking at your budget, consider the cost of owning a car versus using lower cost transportation options. And I know specifically the UIC campus's Office of Sustainability highlights a whole bunch of different transportation options, including carpooling and biking, that are great for saving money and helping the earth. Additionally, libraries are great resources, whether it's professional development or education, entertainment, such as checking out books or music and movies, or even internet access if that's what you need. Cooperative extension offices are located throughout the nation and have community educators that take information from universities and share that with the communities that they serve. This is a great resource for learning. And University of Illinois Extension has educators throughout the state who help people through things like money mentors, master gardeners, and 4-H programs. So overall, make sure to investigate what is in your community and on your campus if you're a student to help you make the most of your resources. And sometimes resources can be a surprise, like a gift or an unclaimed asset. We'll actually put a link in the chat to the website unclaim.org, where you can see if you have any unclaimed money somewhere that you don't know about. Tricky income. So student loans are kind of a special type of income because this is a type of income that you want to minimize since it's ultimately debt and does have to be repaid later. Don't rely on student loan forgiveness to magically wipe away all of your student loan debt. In most loan forgiveness programs, you do have to make minimum payments for a certain amount of years before the rest of the debt is forgiven, which then also becomes taxable. So it is still a type of debt you want to minimize, but it can be helpful in covering any gaps while you're in school. And to learn more about student loans and repayment options, I would highly encourage you to check out our webinars from last year, Navigating Financial Aid from about a year ago, and the student loan repayment from April, so last spring. And I'm going to hand it off to Seisha, and she's going to talk about the second component of setting goals.
Thank you, Evie. So we use the SMART goal method to identify priorities in our spending plan. And here's some of the framework for setting any type of goal, not just fun activities or experiences. So you can use this for anything, whether it's saving for a vacation, losing weight, planning for retirement. This is a great one. Life transitions, or like buying a house or getting married or even buying a car. But definitely, before you've developed your budget, it's useful to know what you want. Especially useful to write down your goals. We know from research, so there actually was some research done a few years ago. We used to joke about how this was never actually researched, that writing down your goals was important, but actually we had a researcher do that in the last few years, that if you write your goals down, you're more likely to achieve them. But if you write them down and share them with a friend or somebody who can keep you in check and check on your progress, you'll actually achieve them even more. So that's a great thing to be aware of. But we like to talk about SMART goals. So SMART actually stands for specific, measurable, agreed upon, realistic, and timely. So the S, or the specific piece, is the who, what, when, where, how part of your goal. The more details you can put into your plan to accomplish this goal, the easier it is to achieve it. Measurable is with finances, it's easy to make a goal achievable by stating the amount that you want to accomplish your goal. Sometimes the difficult part is just kind of calculating how much that will be. Then, of course, when we talk about agreed upon, so if there are others that will help you achieve this goal, you should communicate with them on the plan and how to achieve it together. Others can help achieve your goals, could be roommates, parents, partners, or other family members. R is for realistic. So will you be able to achieve this given goal given your current resources? I gave a funny example yesterday, like if you wanted to save $1 million in the next 6 months, that's probably not a really realistic goal unless somehow you inherit tons of money or you hit the lottery, which is a rare thing for most people. But we want you definitely to be more realistic about how you put this goal together and reevaluate your priorities, your timeline, and your lifestyle choices to reach this goal. And then lastly, timely. When do you want to have this goal completed? And are you working with multiple goals that you need to consider when determining when you can have this goal achieved? It's definitely okay to dream big. A lot of people in school have made decisions about their career based solely on debt. If you're aware of your options and plan correctly, you shouldn't have to compromise your career goals in order to repay your loans. And I think also just making goals is just fun, and making those dreams come true with goal setting can really help. Of course, we also definitely since we're talking about goals, we also want to talk about emergency savings, because that's an important part of building a solid financial plan. We want you to help you start an emergency fund. So their Federal Reserve Board actually conducts a study on the economic status of consumers in the United States every year. So in 2018, 31% of adults said they couldn't cover a $400 surprise expense without borrowing money or selling something to pay it. This is actually an improvement from prior years because this study's been going on for a while now. But a lot of people wouldn't be able to pay for that $400 expense. They'd either have to put it on a credit card and slowly pay it off, or they'd have to borrow from family. And one statistic I found that I thought was important to talk about was that 12% of people said that if they had a $400 expense, that they wouldn't be able to pay it at all. So that's something to be thinking of. So if you're unsure of what your emergency savings goal should be, even a small amount can help you overcome a financial hurdle less than $500. So you can always save, if you have a deductible for insurance for your car, that's one way to start it. But some is better than none, and more is better than some. So, of course, when we talk about saving our time of savings goals, a big component of the SMART goal is to determine the time portion. And this can help you identify whether it's an immediate, short-term, mid-term, or long-term goal. Immediate goals are now or within the next few weeks. Short-term goals, for the purposes of our planning exercise, is within the next 5 years. Midterm is within the next 5 to 10 years, and long-term is typically more than 10 years. And of course, there are some variations in what is defined as short and midterm and long-term goals, but these are usually the timeframes that financial planners use when we're talking about creating a financial plan, and may be important when using investments to reach your goals. So it's something to consider. And when you're in your life, of course, your life may impact what you consider short-term versus long-term as well. So are there any examples of each type of goal for you? For me, short-term goal in the next few weeks is just kind of to reevaluate my retirement and see how much money needs to go in there. Short-term for me, it might be like we would like to a certain dollar amount that we'd like to start saving for. Just some examples, but if you'd like to share in the chat box, we'd definitely like to hear from you. So I'm going to turn back over to Evie, and she's going to talk about expenses.
Awesome. So let's talk a little bit more about how you can categorize and prioritize expenses. So there's many different types of expenses that you may have in your spending plan, and here's just a short list of some of them. And the truth is, every person is going to have different expenses to consider. And there are tons of tools to help you better categorize what those expenses are. In general, you want to identify your fixed expenses and needs so that you can prioritize those first in your spending plan. Examples of those might include lodging, like rent or mortgage, which is listed on here, healthcare, or savings goals. Needs can be fixed, which would include that rent or mortgage or the savings, maybe transportation, such as car payments or a rideshare contract, and your health insurance. Other needs may be variable or flexible, and they might be things such as food or pet food, utilities, transportation, repair or maintenance, personal items, whether it's meds or clothes or toiletries, or if you have any dependents and their care. Discretionary or wants could be different outings that you go on, any of the subscriptions that you have, like Spotify or Netflix or Hulu, vacations that you go on, gifts, or other things that you could go without, at least for a season of time. So when it comes to actually tracking your expenses, there's a ton of different options, and I'm going to just focus on these 4 different general areas because it's really important that each person finds the best thing for them. Not all of these are going to work for everyone, so these are just a few methods. The envelope budgeting is a more old school method. I know a lot of the students I work with don't even know what this is, but you have different envelopes for different categories of spending. Then you put enough cash in that envelope to cover what you anticipate to spend that month. The trick is that once you're out of cash, you're done spending in that category for that month. We know from research that it is much more difficult to spend cash than to spend using plastic cards because you can actually see your money leaving your hand. So this might be a good method for you if you struggle with recognizing that you're spending real money by swiping a card. An electronic version of this method is an app called Good Budget, where you set your spending limits electronically and then manually record your purchase amounts in the app as you spend throughout the month. This is probably a safer way of setting spending limits than carrying your whole spending budget around in cash every month. But sometimes I have students just set 2 different expenses, maybe their entertainment for the month and clothes, and they have envelopes and cash for that, just as one way to monitor maybe a specific spending area. Another one that I've seen recently is the calendar budget. So this is if you're a visual person and want to see it represented on an actual calendar, what you can do is actually assign different colors to different expenses. So maybe your fixed expenses are all in green and you know that you pay your rent on this day, tuition or student loan payment on this date, and utilities on another day. So putting those all in the calendar for the month. I would also include when your income, when you're paid and how much that is, and adding savings into that too. But you can help to track both the fixed ones and maybe you have a friend's birthday that month and you're going to be going out for dinner with them or whatever it might be. But using a calendar can be a really good visual way of a spending plan. Spreadsheets or other electronic methods of tracking expenses can be very helpful as well. There are hundreds of apps that you can use and other programs, or you can just download Excel templates. I know the University of Illinois Extension has one that you can use too. I know some people love apps, and on the next slide, we'll actually ask you about that. But before we go into that, just remember, whatever app you choose, make sure it has bank level security and that you update it regularly to avoid security issues. Last but not least, the tried and true method of paper and pencil budgeting. It seems to be fading more and more, but if you're not familiar with the concept of a check register or balancing your checkbook, this is the method of physically writing down all of your purchases and comparing it to your bank statements at the end of the month. So we mentioned that there's different apps. And so what tools or apps do you use, if you use any, to manage your money? And if you do use one, what do you like most about them? Is it through your bank? Where do you find them? I know I have a student who swears by Mint. She loves that it tracks the expenses, that it's pretty visual, and she can actually see it. Looks like there's someone else that uses Mint. That's awesome. Anybody use one through their bank or a different one that they've heard of, or tried Good Budget, which is what we already mentioned? Online banking program. Acorn, definitely. So there's a lot of different options out there. Oh, and Google Keep, very cool. Every Dollar. See, so there's all kinds of different options and ways to do this. So make sure that you find the best one for you. On the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit and transition into what is need versus want. And so when you hear pizza, would you say pizza is a need or a want? Now for me, who loves pizza, it's easy for me to categorize it as a need. It looks, oh, good point. Someone put context in there, definitely. So we would actually say it depends. So context is a good response to this. Food is a need and pizza is a form of food, but you don't necessarily need to go and buy pizza when you could make a homemade meal or a sandwich at home. But there are different situations. So like we have on the slide, if you're diabetic and it's your only option and your sugar is dropping, the pizza has now turned into a need. So a little bit more about needs and wants. Although everyone's needs and wants will differ depending on your situation, there are a few basics such as food, clothing, and shelter that need to be taken care of. Remember, there will be a lot of temptation to spend while you are in college or even in any season of life. So before beginning school, for example, you need to decide what items you will need and what items will fall into your wants category. Once you have established between your needs and wants, you can make sure to budget for the items that you need before making plans to spend on the items that you want. To help you decide on what a need is, think about it like this. A need is something that if you went without it, it could jeopardize your health, your safety, or your livelihood. And for instance, a smartphone might actually be a need for someone who needs it to do their job, but it may be a want for a retired person. I'm going to hand it over to Seisha again, who's going to talk about the different types of expenses beyond wants and needs.
Thank you, Evie. So we're going to play a little game where you decide whether the item based on the next few slides is a fixed flexible, or occasional expense. So just for reference, a fixed expense is consistent over time and is usually associated with a contract. A flexible expense fluctuates over time and is usually where we go first when trying to reduce expenses, since our spending choices usually drive up or down these type of expenses. And then, of course, occasional expenses can sneak up on us, and they may come once a year or once a quarter, or during irregular intervals, like every 2 months instead of every month. So let's play fixed, flexible, or occasional. So the first one is rent or mortgage. Is it a fixed expense, a flexible expense, or an occasional expense? We have fixed, a lot of fixed. I would also say this is a fixed amount because it is a contract. You have decided to, go with a mortgage. Sorry, my brain was like, I don't know where this is going. But you decided to buy a house, or you signed up that contract for that rent. So that's going to be a fixed expense for you guys. Good job, guys. Okay, next up, groceries. Is this a fixed expense, a flexible expense, or an occasional expense? And Kathy makes a good point. Fixed expenses are hard to change in the short term. We got flexible expenses, flex. Lots of flexible. Yeah, groceries are definitely one of those areas that when we are looking for changes in our spending plan to reduce expenses, groceries are one of those flexible expenses. Great job, guys. I think we got one couple more. The next one is utilities. Is that a fixed expense, a flexible expense, or an occasional expense? Or is it more than one? Fixed, flexible. So it could be fixed depending on, if you decided to have a contract with the company, that's going to be the dollar amount every month. It also depends on the utility, like Chris said. That's great. So it could be fixed, but it also could be flexible. So good job, guys. The next one we have is pet care. I love this. Is it fixed, flexible, or occasional? Thank you for playing too along. We appreciate it. We appreciate participation. It makes the webinar more fun. Flexible. Fixed, food. Flexible, vet emergencies. Yes. Occasional, more. Flex, occasional. Doctor visits are occasional. Yes. So I said the same thing. Food could be flexible depending on how much food you get your pet every month. It also could be just a fixed amount that, how much food you're getting for them every month, and that's how much it is. And of course, occasional are those doctor visits, whether it's yearly or semi-yearly, or, an emergency. So great job, guys. It's a fun little game to play. And then we have one more. It's music subscriptions. Is that a fixed expense, a flexible expense, or an occasional expense? Miles says fixed. Irene says flexible. One says, I don't even know. I don't pay for one. I think it would depend on which company you go with. It could be fixed or it could be flexible. So these are really great answers, guys. Really appreciate it. So let's also talk about some spending secrets. I think that it's important to talk about these secrets that we might keep from other people. So sometimes our financial fears stem from our spending secrets. Sometimes the secrets are small, like a low-key gum addiction, or something big like maxing out a credit card. Most people have something that they struggle with when it comes to finances. And NEFI, the National Endowment for Financial Education, has challenged consumers in the past to share their spendsters, their stories about their purchases. And identifying where you struggle with your spending can help you curb it and develop methods for overcoming temptations. I also want to say that there's a lot of new research coming out about just secret spending in general. Partners keep spending secrets from each other. It's a common theme in married couples as well as married partners. So it's just something to think about. We sometimes may fib or completely lie about the different purchases we make. So this might be something to be thinking about in the future. Next up, of course, we wanted to talk quickly about personalities of money. There's a lot of personality inventories out there, and there are even some money personality inventories. So we love talking about that because I think it's fun. We actually, the University of Illinois Extension, we did a podcast on this. Kathy Sweetler and I did, and we talked about the different money personality tests that are out there. And there's 2 in the chat for you to check out as well. There's a money harmony quiz by Olivia Mellon, and it helps you identify your money personality. You may be an amasser, an avoider, a hoarder, a money monk, or even a money spender. So these are just some good examples of showing the different types of money personalities are out there. And it is kind of fun to do the quiz and figure out what you are. And of course, helping us know our money personalities can help us better communicate our priorities and our spending habits to those we care about. So just some good things to be aware of when we're talking about money personalities. So if you don't mind, we kind of talked about this at the beginning, but if you'd like to share your biggest spending secret, and have you ever had buyer's remorse? If you're comfortable sharing, I can tell you that the biggest buyer's remorse I've ever had was my first purchase of furniture in graduate school. I thought I was getting a really good deal on this furniture, and then my cat scratched it up really, really good a few weeks later. So I was really unhappy with it, and it didn't last very long either. I can tell you that. So does anyone have anything that they'd like to share in the chat? Andrea says she regrets a lot of shoe purchases because they start to hurt her feet after a while. I can agree with that as well. Shoe shopping is really hard. I agree. Other buyer's remorse for anybody else? New smartphone, screen broke. Oh no, I hate that. And you didn't buy the insurance. Ugh, I feel you, Emily. I feel you. Totally understand. It's the worst. So thank you guys for sharing. Just to keep us on time, I'm going to keep moving along. I'm going to switch over to Evie, and she's going to talk about creating your spending plan.
Thanks, Seisha. So now it's kind of putting the pieces together. So we've talked about expenses and income. So let's actually talk about how to create your spending plan. So the spending plan puzzle is one way of looking at it, because it is like a puzzle. You have to consider lots of variables to come up with the best plan to accomplish your goals with the resources that you have available. It's also flexible, so you can change a piece out whenever you need to or have the opportunity to. In fact, I recommend reviewing your spending plan at least every 6 months, or as a college student at the beginning and end of each school year. We all know that with a college student, your summer spending plan versus your school year spending plan can definitely change. So a few keys to think about and evaluate, if you go to the next slide, are identify. So we've talked about income and resources that are available to you at the beginning of this webinar. We've talked through fixed and flexible and occasional expenses through the activity that we just did, comparing income and expenses, setting the SMART goals that Seisha talked about, prioritizing your spending, and then making changes as needed, recognizing that this is a flexible document. So we've talked through income and expenses, and on this next slide, we kind of break it down. So what are those income pieces? These are some of those examples, and we've talked about some other ones previously, and then your expenses. So as we've provided these lists, hopefully you're starting to recognize your expenses that you have and that are unique to you, as well as your income and what's unique to you as well. We've reviewed some of the tools to use, and as you know, there's a lot of different options, from notebooks, Excel sheets, apps, software, calendars. So you need to identify which tool is the best for you that can help you build your spending plan. We're actually going to put several in the chat box, and we'll also be sending an email to everyone that registered with links to these tools and a few more. So in the chat discussion, can you identify a few ways that you can save money by spending less? Or are there ways that you save money by spending less? What would be some of those examples? Yes, coupons are definitely a great way to do that. Bringing your lunch to work for sure. Anybody share subscriptions, Hulu or those kind of things? Thrift stores, eating in and not out. Yes, these are great. Anybody do comparison shopping where you actually compare the product to different spots? Oh, unwillingly sharing Hulu. I get that, definitely. Writing down what you want to buy and then waiting to buy it to see if you actually want it. That is an awesome point, definitely. These are great. And then the other side of it, can you think of ways to diversify your income? Any ideas for that? I know for students, we talk about scholarships or fellowships that can cut the cost or provide money for your education. Maybe you get a second job, sell things that you don't need anymore, selling clothes online. Those are great options. Maybe you barter services with other people. Side hustles, awesome. There's so many different side hustles out there these days. Babysitting, journaling, blogging. Awesome. You guys are great at this. I love this. Okay, to go a little bit more in depth in regards to ways to cut spending, take a close look at small amounts of money that you spend frequently. Even if you just look at your credit card bill, are there expenses that are under $10? And do you see a theme among those? Is it coffee shops or books that you're buying? What are the small ones? Because they add up really fast. We talked about cash or credit, and that maybe you're someone who spends more with cash or with a credit card. And once you know which leads you to extra spending, take steps to change what's in your wallet. And the time to earn. So someone actually brought this up of like writing down those things. But when you're trying to decide whether to buy something or not, calculate how many hours you have to work to pay for it. And then figure out, is the time worth it? So on the next slide, we're going to talk about red flags to watch for. These are just some things that commonly occur, so some things to think about. First of all, your spending plan results in a negative number. So if your expenses exceed your income, that's obviously a red flag. Maybe you forget to include a category in your spending plan. So you're going to want to make sure that you make a revision to that so that you make sure it's in there in the future. You might underestimate costs or overestimate income and resources. This is another way that a spending plan results in a negative number. Maybe there's variations in spending and your income in life transitions, so that's kind of a key time to be looking at that. Or maybe you're getting too much money accumulated in an other category. So how could you reset that and put it towards something else? Is there another category that you could add that to? Like savings, that's always a good option. So when it comes to reprioritizing a spending plan, there are a lot of different reasons that might come about for why you would want to reprioritize. Your life situation, different circumstances that come up. I already mentioned summer versus school year for a college student. Maybe you have a special trip that you're hoping to take, so you're wanting to put more in savings for that trip. There could be medical changes or a new living situation, but make sure that you're aware of those as it is a piece of the puzzle that we've been talking about. And this is really important to recognize that your spending plan is flexible and your goals change based on situations. Okay, some final reminders. Spend less than you earn. That should always be the goal, and hopefully a spending plan helps you accomplish that. Prioritize your saving to accomplish goals. Think about what you're working towards and why it's important that you save. Student loans turn into debt later, so keep that in mind. If you don't need all those loans, then don't take all the full amount that they offer you. Change your plan to match your needs. And finally, track your spending how you choose. Figure out what works best for you. So that's the conclusion of this webinar. We do have a couple things we want to make you aware of. We do a financial literacy badges program. And so this is one of those badge eligible programs by attending this webinar. So there is more information in the chat box so that you can learn more about that opportunity. The other thing is in a month, we're going to be doing another webinar. This one is called Speed versus Savings. Do you need a car? It'll be on Thursday, November 14th at noon Central Standard Time. So we hope you can join us for that as well. And then the final piece is we encourage you to stay connected with us. So make sure that you follow us via these different avenues. And if you do have any other questions, feel free to enter them in the chat box, and Stacia or I can address them via chat or by talking through it too. So thanks for attending.
Yeah, and again, if you have a question, feel free to drop it in the chat box. If you're brave enough, I don't know if anyone could be unmuted, but if you feel brave enough that you'd like to ask a question, feel free. Great. Glad you could come. Oh, lots of links. Okay. There's a question from Miles. He says, if I don't make money and am a dependent on my parents, how do I prioritize? Can you elaborate a little bit, Miles? Like, are you a student? Do you receive any kind of funds? Do you mind just elaborating a little bit? I'm sorry. Maybe then I'll have a little bit better answer. I'm going to go to Emily's question. She says, I've gotten good about tracking expenses. How do I take the next step and shift that to setting and applying a budget?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Sorry, my brain was like, oh, hold on, I gotta think about this.
Yeah.
I think being here on this webinar is a good step for it, right? I think it's important to, you can try any of the methods that we talked about. And there were in the chat, they might have gone pretty fast, some spreadsheets and things like that to use. So that could be a good way. You could also pick a website or an app that might be helpful to help you shift. But tracking the expenses is, to me is like there's like a very small step from tracking to making a spending plan. Do you agree, Evie?
Yeah, I definitely do. And I think since you're tracking expenses already, then you probably have an idea of how much money you're spending in different categories. And so now it's kind of taking that information and those totals and shifting it into that spending plan. So on average, I spend X dollars on food or whatever the different expenses are. So it sounds like you have all the information, and it's just finding the way in which you want to. And I know Kathy just put up the making it on a college budget Excel worksheet. That could be a good first step for Emily, at least, I would say.
Hi, this is Kathy. Since you just people you're throwing out my name there, I thought I'd jump in.
Yeah.
One thing I think that maybe to help make that connection there is like, what are you trying to change? So the spending plans help us make a change. So if you're thinking, I want to be able to put more money towards savings, once you've tracked your money, you've categorized it, you have some history, you can look back a couple months, you can say, oh, I think if I cut back in these areas, then I can move that money into savings, or I can move it to pay down debt. I could save it for when I want to do a transition to a new apartment or a new job or whatever. And you can kind of set your limit and say, okay, I'm going to try to stay this much on food or this much on clothing so that I have that money to put into savings. So really a spending plan is useful when you're trying to direct your money into certain categories. Does that help at all?
I think that's great. There we go.
Oh, sorry. You might be hearing me typing. I'm really sorry. But I was just responding to Miles and someone who's on their iPhone as well. But I think, I was a graduate student and I was not making income for a while. So I think if you are using your student loans to kind of live off of, you might need to make some choices about, like how much you want to spend, because you have to remember like that eventually turns into debt and you have to repay that back. So one of the things I always made sure with my loans was that I always had my housing paid for. So that no matter what else happened, I still had a place to live. I would tell you also, like, just having, like, Miles, I would just like have that discussion with your parents and see how much you should get. I don't know if there's a good percentage. It depends on like what year you're in. Cause like, if you're a freshman, like that's different. Like I feel like a lot of things are taken care of as freshmen. If you're looking like closer to like junior, senior year, you might be having expenses for things like travel or, for interviews and things like that. So I think that, having that discussion, like, but if we're talking about things like food, we have, the USDA has, a yearly, expense sheet for individuals how much they should be spending on food. So that might be something to think about. Yeah. And Andrea says also depends on location and cost as well. But really good question, guys. Everyone's situation is different. So that's why we kind of give you larger, more broad answers. But if you have more questions, like we'd love to either like set up a time with you to talk or even just email back and forth and help you answer those questions. So I just want to make that clear as well. Yeah, like I said, Miles, if you have more questions, feel free to send us an email. Andrew, if you wouldn't mind putting the student Illinois money, or I can throw my email in there too, and that way you can ask us. Does anyone else have any questions or anything else they want to chime in on? Like I said, we want to be mindful of your time. So, if you need to hop off, that's okay too. We just hope that you've enjoyed the experience and you got to learn something new, and maybe take it back to a friend or a family member and share some great things that you learned. But we've, really enjoyed having everyone on, and the discussion was really good.
We'll stick around for a couple more minutes, but please feel free to drop off if you have class to get to, or a lunch date to get to, or trick-or-treating to get to. So, but we'll stay on for a couple more minutes. Feel free to bounce if you need to, though. And Kathy just put in the peer educators financial wellness for college students email. So she runs a program through University of Illinois Extension. Kathy, since you're on, why don't you talk a little bit about your program?
Thank you. I was just going to say that I'm not sure everybody on the call are college students, but if you're a young adult or a college student and you want to dig into this, how do you move next onto your developing your own spending plan? Peer educators can help you by email or in person if you happen to be in Urbana-Champaign area. But we can do it by email or FaceTime or whatever as well too. So that's a resource open to you. Or if you are an adult that's not a student, and again, in Illinois, we have a Money Mentors program in several units or several counties around the state, and you can be matched up with a mentor to help you with a spending plan too. Again, you can contact me and I'll try to get you directed to the right county for that.
Or if you're an adult and have questions, feel free to, send them over our way. Or if you really enjoyed a webinar and you want to like partner with us because you're a university person, let us know, because we love partners.
We do love partners.
Wonderful webinar, and thank you everybody for participating. It was a great chat.
It was a great chat, wasn't it, Kathy?
I was loving it.
I love chats. I love when they go really well. Okay. Well, if there are no more questions, I think we'll be closing down the webinar. But thank you everyone for hopping on. We hope that you enjoyed it and you learned something new.